2025 could bring some shocking changes. Imagine a powerful dragon reshaping global power, humans communicating mind to mind through telepathy, and Europe facing a future with drastically fewer people. Now, I don't think Baba Vanga had a thing for mythological creatures, but she did tell of a quote dragon rising to power in the world. Not the scaly, fire-breathing kind though. The dragon she was describing was much more metaphorical. Many believe this supposed dragon represents a powerful alliance between three countries: Russia, India, and China. Baba Vanga spoke of a force that would unite these nations, creating a powerful bloc that could dominate the world. With Russia's land and military strength, India's growing tech industry, and China's economic power, it's easy to see how an alliance between them could cause quite a ripple effect. Baba Vanga didn't get into specifics about what this would mean for the world, but you can imagine it could lead to some pretty major shifts in power. If this dragon rises, expect some big geopolitical drama on the horizon. Could this be the precursor to a third world war? Vanga hinted at the possibility of major global conflict in 2025, and if this dragon rises as she predicted, we may be looking at heightened tensions and struggles for global dominance. Now, when you've got big countries uniting like this, other world powers may feel threatened. Vanga predicted that the rise of this dragon would lead to major global conflicts. Fun. You know what? Hey, it's a tradition around here. We reign in the new year by talking about all the ways it may be one of the last. And in this case, you can pretty much guarantee that when a big new power alliance emerges, the existing power players aren't just gonna sit back and watch. Think about it. Back in the day when the Soviet Union started getting stronger, the world held its breath, waiting for the potential fallout. Same with China and Russia today. Tensions have been building for years, so when you throw in a huge alliance that challenges the established order, things are bound to get tense. Think proxy wars, cyber warfare, and maybe even full-on military confrontations. Vanga basically saw the dragon's rise as a precursor to all kinds of international struggles, especially when the new powers start flexing their muscle and threatening to shift the balance too much. Then there's the whole issue of Europe. Vanga saw Europe's population shrinking as a result of a series of very unfortunate events, likely a result of the aforementioned international struggles. She was not just talking about a drop in birth rates. Baba predicted a massive exodus thanks to all the chaos that would come from wars and conflict. As countries get more aggressive and tensions rise, people are gonna have to pack up and leave. Refugees from destroyed cities and displaced people would flood out of Europe looking for safety elsewhere. Supposedly, entire cities could become ghost towns. If this happens, Europe could eventually end up being sparsely populated compared to other places, and it'd be hard to recover from that level of disruption. 2025 and onward is apparently not going to be happy times for the continent, according to Baba Vanga. Alright, let's get into something less depressing but still wild: human telepathy. Quite a bold claim, but supposedly she predicted World War II and the Chernobyl disaster and a whole other list of things. Vanga said that by 2025 humans could develop the ability to communicate telepathically, so mind to mind. No more texting, zooming, or phone calling. For the last 120 people on the planet who still call each other on the phone, you could just send thoughts directly into someone else's head. Now, this sounds pretty fantastical, but is it really? There are elements of this already. Elon Musk's company Neuralink, for example, is working on brain-computer interfaces that let people control technology with their minds. They've got this implant that's able to allow people to control computer cursors, play video games, and even do 3D design all with their brains. They've done this with real people now, 3 in total, and they're planning more implants over the course of the year. It's not exactly telepathy, but it's getting close. If we can connect directly to machines, is it really that much of a stretch to think that someday we'll be able to connect to other people's minds as well? Baba Vanga predicted that 2025 would be the year we make huge leaps in lab-grown organs. No more waiting for organ donors or worrying about finding a match. Instead, scientists will be able to grow organs in labs and deliver them to people who need them. Lab-grown kidneys, hearts, lungs, whatever you need. Now, we're not quite there yet, but we're pretty close. Think about it. We've already grown things like skin and BLOO DoD vessels in labs, and researchers are making big strides in the organ growing department as well. Imagine a future where you could just get a new organ, like a fresh replacement for your liver or your kidneys, grown just for you and ready to go. This kind of breakthrough could change everything about healthcare and life expectancy. We could see people living longer, healthier lives. Some experts are even saying we could push life expectancy past 120 years if this technology takes off. Now let's get into the really out there stuff though. Baba Vanga also predicted that by 2025 humanity would make contact with extraterrestrial life. Some say we've already made contact. Look at all the UAPs hovering over New Jersey the last couple months. We got a video on that. Check that out on the channel after this one. But what I'm really saying here is that it'll be definitive, 100% confirmed contact on a large scale. Now before you start picturing little green men standing in your backyard, just take a step back. Vanga didn't give much detail on how this would go down. She did say it could cause a, quote, global crisis or apocalypse. Key word there though is could. I think we already assume that aliens showing up could cause a bit of a problem, but I mean, maybe not. The really odd detail about this prediction is that apparently these extraterrestrials are set to introduce themselves to us during a major sporting event. So maybe this year, instead of just waiting for the Super Bowl commercials, I'll actually make my father proud for once and tune into the whole game. Alright, back to the destruction though. Baba Vanga saw a lot of it coming our way, in the form of not just international conflict, but natural disasters. Massive ones, like eruptions of dormant volcanoes, huge floods, earthquakes, especially along the US West Coast. Pretty much all our brains are going to the same place right now. California. Wildfires have been absolutely devastating and the death toll is rising. Now, some are saying there could be arson involved here. Apparently people have been accused, but at this point we really don't know for sure. I don't want to focus on this too much here, just had to mention that it is going on. All these disasters, especially the big ones Vanga was predicting, could lead to something worse, an environmental meltdown on a massive scale. Imagine the Earth getting hit with massive floods, more wildfires, and earthquakes all at once. It would make our current problems look like a walk in the park. Rising seas, extreme weather, widespread destruction, everything could be in chaos. And let's face it, with experts saying climate change is already making natural disasters more frequent and intense, this kind of environmental collapse feels pretty plausible. Whole ecosystems could collapse, and it might become harder and harder for humanity to survive in areas that get hit hardest. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. Baba Vanga also saw a big breakthrough coming in the form of energy. She predicted that by 2025, scientists would discover some kind of new energy source, something clean, limitless, and unlike anything we've ever seen before. This could change everything. No more reliance on fossil fuels, no more energy crisis. Think about it, a world where we have unlimited clean energy powering everything from homes to spaceships. Makes me wonder if those aliens showing up during the Super Bowl halftime show may have a little gift for us. Maybe we'll come up with something ourselves though, a scientific miracle if you will. Either way, this discovery could be the key to solving a lot of our problems, and it might even help save the planet from the environmental chaos Baba Vanga saw coming as well. Finally though, Baba Vanga made a pretty chilling prediction about the future of technology, specifically around artificial intelligence and automation. She predicted that by 2025, AI would reach a level where it could significantly disrupt human society, potentially even leading to the replacement of many human jobs, as if that hasn't happened already. This prediction is, of course, very relevant today, as we see AI and automation technology evolving at a rate we just don't seem equipped to keep up with. We're already seeing AI being used in everything from customer service to advanced research and even creative fields like writing and art generation. What Vanga predicted is that the rise of machines capable of doing work once done by humans would have a big effect on society. As machines become more sophisticated, human workers will find themselves displaced in industries like manufacturing, retail, even healthcare. Imagine robots performing surgeries, running entire factories, leaving human workers out of jobs. This could lead to widespread economic collapse and social unrest. Point is, Vanga's prediction about AI taking over human roles isn't too far off from the reality that we're heading into. We could see entire industries transformed in just a few years. Nostradamus predicted the rise of a ruler who would be cloaked in darkness and would rise from the east to gain power, but not in the way you might think. We're not talking about some traditional monarch, the kind that steps out in robes and gives big speeches. Instead, this quote-unquote shadow monarch would operate behind the scenes, a person who doesn't need a spotlight to wield power, someone who stays in the background, pulling strings in boardrooms, through political maneuvering and controlling the flow of information. And if you think about it, this idea feels pretty relevant in 2025. Think about how big tech companies and media moguls already have more influence over our daily lives than we realize. In a way, they control what we see, hear, and think. What if someone took that to a whole new level, influencing entire elections, shaping public opinion, impacting economies without ever being seen on the front page of a newspaper? Maybe this shadow monarch doesn't need to be a single person. Maybe it could represent a whole network of power controlled by big corporations and tech giants. Now, Nostradamus also talked about winged beings fleeing the fires of the earth, which sounds pretty dramatic, but most of his work does, to be fair. But what could this really mean? Well, on the surface, it sounds like some sort of mass migration, and honestly, makes sense. With climate change pushing temperatures higher, wildfires, floods, rising sea levels, we could see huge movements of people in 2025. But what about the sky part? Are we talking about birds? Or is Nostradamus hinting at a future where people are forced to flee disaster zones by air? Coastal cities around the world are already facing the possibility of sinking because of rising sea levels, so maybe whole populations will be airlifted to safety. And let's not forget about wildlife too. Species already struggling to survive might have to migrate in ways that we haven't seen them migrate before. It's entirely possible that animal migration patterns could change dramatically thanks to all the chaos. In short, this may not just be referring to human migration, it could be this global shift with people and animals fleeing to find safety on a planet that's getting harder and harder to live on. Now, this one's super interesting. Nostradamus mentioned a new race emerging from unseen hands. Now, some might view this as extraterrestrials from some unknown planet, but to me, this sounds a lot more like artificial life. In 2025, AI, or even the idea of genetically engineered beings taking on more of a role in our society, could be a reality. We've already got AI running in the background of most tech we use, and biotech is making huge strides as well. So why not take this a step further? So imagine a future where we're not just building robots or software to help with menial tasks, but actually creating entirely new beings, sentient robots, the type that pretty much every dystopian sci-fi movie warns us against. But this could also mean lab-grown organisms, either good or bad. Maybe we'd create something that could clean up pollution or help with farming in inhospitable places. As we get better at creating these beings though, what happens when they surpass us? In the case of robots, they get smarter than us, not hard. And in the case of the lab organisms, they could just get out of control. We're already seeing AI that can do tasks better than humans, so what's next? If our AI becomes too advanced, could we end up with something we can't control? Nostradamus might have been talking about the risks of what happens when humans try to play God, creating life without fully understanding the consequences. Nostradamus said that the brightest orb would crack. The brightest orb? Well, it seems to me that's either the sun or the moon. Hopefully neither will end up splitting in half. Thankfully, I haven't heard any scientists worrying about that happening anytime soon, but this could be a metaphor for some kind of accident in space exploration, maybe. We're already planning lunar missions through NASA's Artemis program, and the idea of creating a permanent base on the moon is being talked about more and more. But what if something goes horribly wrong? Maybe during one of these missions, there's a huge failure or some kind of space-related disaster. Imagine the ripple effects something like that could have. For starters, it would cause a loss of trust in that technology, and we could have a major issue related to space where we take a step back as a species and hold off on further missions. That would just be sad. Nostradamus talked about a ruler from the land of fire. What could he mean by a land of fire? A hot part of the world, somewhere with a lot of volcanoes, a place with a lot of conflict? Well, that would make sense because supposedly this ruler is betrayed, possibly taken down by someone or a bunch of people close to them. Imagine you have a ruler in, say, an oil-rich country who's been in charge for ages, but then, out of nowhere, the people closest to them, maybe even their own family, turn on them. It's not out of the question, it's happened before. Nostradamus may have been warning us that power doesn't last forever. If someone gets too comfortable with total control, it might be the very people they trust who bring them down. This could also apply to big, powerful corporations that fall apart, either from consumers like us turning on them, or some whistleblower coming forward and blowing the lid off all the messed up stuff they do behind the scenes. Oh, how I'd love to see something like that happen this year. Seas will cry out. Well, that doesn't sound very good. And it's hard to ignore how relevant that sounds in today's world. With rising sea levels and the ever-growing threat of climate change, the seas could quite literally start to weep in the form of flooding. Coastal cities like Miami, New York, places in Southeast Asia could be underwater in decades, but maybe Nostradamus was actually writing about something even bigger than that, something more literal to the weeping part. That the seas are crying out for attention because of an environmental crisis. Nostradamus could have been talking about the tipping point, the moment when humanity is forced to confront the fact that we've been harming the environment for too long. If the oceans rise faster than we can prepare for, could trigger mass migrations, wars over resources, and a complete rethinking of how we are going to live on this planet. Maybe he was saying the seas aren't just rising, they're sending us loud and clear messages that we need to change our ways or we'll face the consequences. Or maybe a whole bunch of mermaids will just get sad and start crying or something. I don't know, like, don't ask me to save the ocean. What am I supposed to do? This one's pretty chilling. Nostradamus warned about a plague of the mind, and it's not hard to imagine that he was talking about mental health. The mental health crisis we're seeing today, with so many people struggling with anxiety, depression, burnout, a mental plague could be on the table in 2025. Think about it. We're living in an age where social media is this constant presence. Bad news is everywhere, and yes, I'm aware I'm not really helping with a video like this, so it's no surprise that more and more people are feeling disconnected, overwhelmed, and isolated. What if this mental strain becomes so widespread that it starts to affect entire societies? What if entire populations start struggling with mental health on this massive scale, so much so that it becomes a major global issue? It's hard to say that that's not already happening. In 2025, this silent plague of the mind could take a heavy toll on the world, leading to breakdowns in trust and an increase in social unrest. Nostradamus wrote about sands rising and flowers blooming. Well, that actually sounds like a pretty hopeful prediction, but what exactly could it mean? Maybe this is about efforts to turn deserts into livable, productive land, like those projects trying to green deserts in places like the Sahara or Australia. In 2025, we could see more of these kinds of projects. That could be great, but just for the sake of it, let's look at the worst case scenario, because that's kind of the whole point of this video. What if in trying to make deserts more habitable, we end up messing with the ecosystems? Say you had a desert being transformed into farmland, but at the cost of wildlife and biodiversity. Not that there's a whole lot of that in the desert, but look, my job here is to make things sound as foreboding as possible. This next one's all about wildfires. Nostradamus talked about fiery birds descending from the sky, and while it could be a metaphor for anything, it sounds an awful lot like wildfires. In 2025, we could be looking at more severe and frequent ones caused by rising temperatures and dry conditions. California, Australia, parts of South America, they've been dealing with more massive fires that are only getting worse. But what about the birds part? Could this be referring to the planes and helicopters used to fight the fires? Or could it maybe be referring to something from the sky, like a weapon causing them? So yeah, maybe this isn't about natural disasters at all, but something more intentional and sinister. Either way, it's looking like wildfires are going to continue being a major problem in the coming years. Finally, we have sleeping giants. Nostradamus talked about ancient giants who've slept for eons but will rise again. He may have been talking about something more metaphorical, but let's just take this in the most literal sense for fun. What if he was writing about something seismic? In 2025, we could see major natural disasters. In this case, volcanic eruptions or earthquakes, places that have been quiet for centuries. Imagine dormant volcanoes or fault lines that haven't really stirred in a long time suddenly becoming active again. This would send shockwaves through the world, so maybe Nostradamus was warning us that something big, something we've also forgotten about, could suddenly wake up and throw everything off balance. From the depths a ruler will rise, empires will fall, and new waves will reign. The aquatic empire from the realm of the ocean. This ominous prediction from Nostradamus is supposedly said to play out this year. A lot to unpack with this one. From the depths a ruler will rise? That sounds like it could be pretty metaphorical. If the quote ended there, I'd think it meant that some unknown power-hungry person would come to power, not literally someone rising up from under the water. But then he doubles down by referencing waves and caps it off, writing about an aquatic empire from the realm of the ocean. Not much room for metaphor at that point. It pretty clearly means something bad rising up from the water. So what could it be? Could he be talking about dangerous rising sea levels? Maybe, but that's something we've tread on plenty of times on the channel before. Pun very much intended. So here's another thing to consider when it comes to this aquatic empire thing. How about all those mysterious drones that have been showing up recently? There were reports of 50 drones flying out from the Atlantic Ocean near New Jersey. Could this be a sign of what Nostradamus was writing about? Maybe Nostradamus wasn't just talking about rising seas. What if he was predicting the rise of a literal aquatic empire? Aliens who have been holding up deep in the ocean since the beginning of time, finally ascending from the watery depths to wage war on the people of the land. This isn't necessarily a new idea. Stories of underwater kingdoms or forces rising from the depths have always intrigued people, but with more and more of these UAP sightings, it's starting to feel just a little less like fantasy. Maybe. All I'm saying is I think the government should really look into constructing giant mechs to battle the monstrous beasts that are going to be climbing out of the water to trample our cities. Quote, cruel wars and the outbreak of an ancient plague are also predicted to play out in England in 2025. Poor Europe. Baba Vanga also predicted horrible conflict erupting there this year. The idea of plague is nothing new, especially after the chaos of the little pandemic in 2020. Nostradamus was known for his eerie accuracy in some past predictions, and with the world still recovering from the effects of that global health crisis, him predicting that there will be another devastating plague, something way worse, definitely not something anyone wants to hear. In his writings, he talked about a resurgence of an old disease, one that could ravage the population, possibly even more deadly than any war. Some analysts believe this could refer to a new, more aggressive form of an old illness, maybe one from 2020, but it could also mean something like the Black Death, which decimated Europe centuries ago, and that would really suck. And mix in all the war and social unrest, and you got a recipe for a pretty crappy year for Europe. Now, moving on to Brazil. Nostradamus had some pretty wild predictions for what he called the Garden of the World, which some have interpreted to mean Brazil. He warned of flooding and volcanic activity and mentioned the country being, quote, seized and plunged into the tub and forced to drink waters poisoned by sulfur. Certainly sounds like a natural disaster to me. Flooding is already a big problem in Brazil, especially with deforestation, climate change making storms and heavy rains more intense, but the volcanic part, that's a bit trickier. Brazil isn't really known for active volcanoes, but just south of it in countries like Chile, well, they've had eruptions. The area is full of shifting tectonic plates, so it's not completely out of the question that Brazil could see volcanic activity, and Nostradamus' mention of poisoned waters could be pointing to the country's rising pollution levels. Rivers and oceans are getting more contaminated from things like industrial waste, deforestation, and oil spills, so maybe this prediction is a metaphor for a struggle with environmental damage and how it's leading to more natural disasters. Let's stay on this topic of natural disasters for a moment though, because Nostradamus wrote about them a lot. He had a pretty grim take on natural disasters in that they would only get worse, eventually leading to the destruction of mankind. At least some interpret. Again, his writing is often pretty nebulous with a lot of metaphor. He wrote, "The dry earth will grow more parched and there will be great floods when it is seen. That's a pretty biblical sounding warning, but some people are looking around at the current world we're living in and wondering if this could be referring to the extreme weather we're already seeing. Last year alone, we had some major hurricanes: Beryl, Milton, and Helene. Helene ended up being the deadliest hurricane to hit the US mainland since Katrina in 2005. And then there were the catastrophic floods in Afghanistan and Pakistan, where over 1,000 people lost their lives. Of course, natural disasters happen every year, and they've happened all throughout history, but there's been a noticeable increase in how frequent and intense they are, making Nostradamus' prediction feel eerily relevant. So, are we really seeing the signs of what he described as the end times? Personally, I think people tend to look at esoteric writing like this and pull from it what makes sense to them. It's just natural for us to draw comparisons to the world around us, but regardless of how you feel about so-called seers, deadly natural disasters do seem to be happening more frequently. Next is Nostradamus' prediction of an asteroid collision. He specifically spoke of a giant stone causing massive destruction, and 2025 is the year that this could apparently happen. In his words, "From the cosmos a fireball will rise, a harbinger of fate. The world pleads science and fate in cosmic dance, the fate of the earth, a second chance." Sounds pretty horrifying, but at least he said we'd get a second chance. Now, we know that near-Earth asteroids pass by our planet all the time. In fact, hundreds of them swing by Earth safely each year without causing any issues, but the idea of a massive asteroid hitting Earth is still a real possibility, one that scientists are constantly keeping their eyes on. Space agencies like NASA track the orbits of large asteroids, and while we haven't had a major collision in modern times, history shows us that asteroids have caused mass extinction in the past. Now, there's comfort in the fact that if a massive asteroid were on a collision course with our planet, space agencies would know about it well in advance. But at this point, we still don't have a tried and true method of handling one. Technology is being developed because eventually we'll probably need it, but fingers crossed, it just won't be this year. Nostradamus wasn't just fixated on disaster and plague though, he also made some predictions about global politics, saying great powers will clash, which sounds like a pretty clear reference to the ongoing conflicts that we're seeing around the world today, with rising tensions between countries like the US and China, the ongoing war in Eastern Europe, and constant power struggles in the Middle East. It feels like we're seeing exactly what Nostradamus might have been hinting at, but he also predicted a decrease in the influence of established Western countries and the rise of new world powers. If you look at how countries like China and India are becoming more influential economically and politically, you could see this shift happening. The West, especially the US and Europe, used to have a lot of control over global decisions, but we're witnessing a rise in new powers that are shaking things up. So things are definitely changing. Will it be good? Will it be bad? We'll just have to wait and find out. On the bright side though, not all of Nostradamus' predictions were dark and doom-filled. He also foresaw major advancements in medicine, especially when it comes to treating illnesses and preventing them before they even start. In 2025, we could see some huge breakthroughs, like the rise of personalized medicine, where treatments are tailored to individual genetics, making them way more effective. AI-powered healthcare is starting to make waves, with machines able to analyze health data faster and more accurately than humans. In fact, it's possible that we'll see new treatments for conditions like dementia, Alzheimer's, and chronic diseases, which have been really hard to manage until now. Nostradamus might have been predicting the future of healthcare, where technology and science come together to create these highly effective treatments that could change the way we approach medicine for the better. Not sure how much of a difference this will make if his other predictions play out, but let's just hope he was wrong about those, or that we've been misunderstanding his words. Nostradamus also predicted a, quote, very great famine through pestiferous wave, which sounds pretty unsettling. The wave part could be something like tsunamis destroying crops, but then there's the word pestiferous, which means harmful or disease causing. So this could also mean the famine is caused by something that ruins crops, like a disease of some kind. Pests, you know? I mentioned global conflict earlier as well. Maybe it's something like toxic gas released in a war, or radiation messing up the environment, causing crops to die. Well, let's try and end things on a positive note. With all the talk of war, asteroids, plagues, and death, it's nice to know that Mr. Negative also predicted an end to a big conflict of some kind this year, writing, "Through long war, all the army exhausted, so that they do not find money for the soldiers. Instead of gold or silver, they will come to coin leather, Gallic brass, and the crescent sign of the moon." Like a lot of his work, this is pretty vague, but with news of a possible ceasefire to what's been a very prolonged conflict over in the Middle East, maybe there's some truth to this one. I know I certainly hope so. In the Simpsons episode Margian Chronicles, Season 27, Episode 16, the Simpsons volunteer for a mission to colonize Mars. Initially set for a distant future, their mission gets bumped up when funding starts to dry up. But when it's time to launch, Marge and Lisa are ready to board the spaceship, only for the shuttle to fail at the last minute. Now, I know what you're thinking, the Simpsons predicting Mars missions, that's a bit of a stretch, but in reality, we've been hearing a lot of talk about Mars recently. Elon Musk has been talking about colonizing Mars for years. In fact, his company SpaceX has been testing Starship launches for potential Mars missions. Musk has even said that he envisions regular trips to Mars to eventually build a self-sustaining colony, saying, quote, "No matter what happens with landing success, SpaceX will increase the number of spaceships traveling to Mars exponentially with every transit opportunity. We want to enable anyone who wants to be a space traveler to go to Mars. That means you, your family, your friends, anyone who dreams of great adventure." NASA is also working on sending astronauts to an asteroid in 2025 and are hoping to send crewed missions to the Red Planet by the 2030s. The idea that we could be looking at Mars colonization within the next few decades is looking pretty plausible. Let's just hope things won't play out like they did in the cartoon with the shuttle exploding, but the fact that we are seriously talking about sending humans to Mars in the near future is something that really can't be ignored. Now, in the classic Simpsons episode Itchy and Scratchy Land from Season 6, the Simpsons visit a high-tech theme park where the violent cartoon antics of Itchy and Scratchy come to life. Not through human actors and costumes, but through robots. Now, this isn't exactly a groundbreaking idea, right? Sci-fi has been toying with the concept of robots replacing jobs pretty much since the beginning of sci-fi, but all the same, looking at it today, we're seeing robots become more and more advanced every year. And with AI becoming a massive force in our world, it's not that far-fetched to imagine a future where instead of actors in cartoon character costumes, we have full-on functioning robots bringing some of our favorite animated characters to life at theme parks. In the Simpsons episode Bart to the Future, which we'll be bringing up multiple times on this list, which is Season 11, Episode 17, in case you want to give it a rewatch, Lisa Simpson becomes the first female president of the United States, but what else did that episode predict? Well, it also forecasted Donald Trump's presidential run. Remember, this was years before he even ran for office in 2016, so if the Simpsons got that right, maybe we should start taking their political predictions a bit more seriously. Also, buying a Christmas tree during the Halloween season. In this opening scene, Homer, dressed as Bender from Futurama, pulls back the flap of his costume to reveal a sticker reading Ivanka 2028. Now, the idea of Ivanka Trump running for president might seem kinda silly, but I feel like I'm probably speaking for a lot of us when I say I really don't know what to expect from the world I'm living in these days. I don't think anything would surprise us at this point. Will she run in 2028? Only time will tell, but we wouldn't be shocked if we start hearing whispers about it in the very near future. Now let's talk about something that might be a little closer to home, pun intended. In the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode from Season 13, Marge upgrades the family home into a state-of-the-art smart house called the Ultra House 3000. If you remember the episode, it's basically a 2001 A Space Odyssey parody, and of course the house goes rogue, starts trying to kill Homer. A bit over the top, sure, but here's the thing. Smart homes are already here, and they're getting way more advanced. We've got devices like Alexa and Google Home that can control everything from the lights to your music, but the more people rely on these gadgets, the more we've started to notice some weird quirks. Lights turning off without command, or Alexa butting in on a conversation without being asked. It's like every now and again these machines start to act a little too sentient. So while we haven't yet seen a smart home completely turn on its owners and try to kill them, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility maybe. With AI getting smarter and tech getting more embedded in our everyday lives. Who knows? Maybe one day you'll have to make sure your smart fridge isn't secretly plotting your demise. Next up, let's talk about mind control through music. In Season 12, Episode 14, New Kids on the Block, Bart, Nelson, Milhouse, and Ralph form a boy band called Party Posse. Their first song is a massive hit, but their song is actually being used for subliminal mind control. In the music video for their song Drop the Bomb, part of the chorus goes, Yvan ik nioj, the lyrics of which are spelled out on screen, while Lisa discovers that when spelled out backwards, the line becomes join the Navy. In the episode, the music producer behind the boy bands is revealed to be a Navy lieutenant, using music as a covert tool for recruitment. While the plot itself is clearly ridiculous, it does touch on something that's not as far-fetched as it sounds, the idea of subliminal messages in media. Now, this is of course nothing new, but in a world where we're more consumed by media than ever before, who's to say we won't see more subtle psychological tactics used in pop music, social media, movies, and the countless shows we stream online. I think the most ridiculous and hard to believe part about this episode is actually Nelson being in a boy band, and that's saying a lot. The Simpsons also have an AI robot takeover in an episode. In the episode Them Robot from season 23, Mr. Smithers calls all the workers into a meeting. And what's the big announcement? Well, Smithers proudly reveals an army of AI robots, telling the employees, you will train them and they will replace you. Creepy, silly and fun though, because it's The Simpsons and the robots are fittingly voiced by Brent Spiner, who played Data in Star Trek, but also this is just a little too real. According to a 2023 report from Business Insider, the World Economic Forum estimates that 85 million jobs will be replaced by robots by 2025. This whole AI takeover thing isn't just some wild idea, it's already starting to happen. And while robots might make certain jobs easier or more efficient, the flip side is that millions of people might lose their jobs as a result. Next, let's talk about something a little more uplifting, literally, hover cars. The Simpsons wasn't the first to dream up flying cars. I mean, science fiction has been teasing them for decades, but what's really cool is there's actually a company called Samson Sky working on bringing this dream to life. They've developed a flying car called the Switchblade, which, to be honest, is more like a car with retractable wings rather than a full-on hover vehicle. But still, it's pretty cool. The company claims it's the world's first flying sports car, and while it might not be the classic hovering car we've all imagined, I think it still counts. At least it's creeping towards it. The Simpsons also predicted Trump's 2024 run. This one also ties into the Barbie movie release, but we'll get to that in a minute. So back in 2015, there was a Simpsons short called Trumptastic Voyage. In a scene where Homer flies by a billboard, we see a sign that reads Trump 2024. At the time, it was a totally out there prediction, right? Well, we all know Trump ran in 2024 and won, but that's not the only eerily accurate prediction from The Simpsons when it comes to Trump. Fast forward to 2023, when the Barbie movie hit theaters, and on the same exact day, Trump was arrested. Coincidence? Maybe, but if you watch the episode Lisa vs. Malibu Stacy from season 5, episode 14, you'll catch a news report mentioning the release of a new Malibu Stacy doll. Toward the end of the segment, the anchor casually adds that the US president has been arrested. In 2023, that moment felt way too familiar. The fact that The Simpsons nailed both Trump's political comeback and the exact timing of the Barbie movie's release and the rest stuff, I don't know, it's just, it's really weird. Economic collapse. Now that's fun to think about. Well, again, in Bart to the Future, the United States economy crashes. And in the episode, it's supposedly directly tied to Donald Trump's presidency. While the idea of an economic crash under Trump seemed like a far-out prediction at the time, the reality we're facing today is far from rosy. I mean, just in general, the world's economy is struggling. After the global disruptions of 2020 and beyond, lockdowns, the rise of remote work, supply chain chaos, it's just no surprise that things haven't exactly bounced back. Sure, we're not talking about a full-on economic meltdown just yet, but the signs of something major and destructive are definitely there. Here's something that's already here though, NFTs. In The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode Wild Bart's Can't Be Token from 2023, Mayor Quimby announces that the town's art museum is being closed down because all art is now going to be sold as NFTs. Now, at the time, NFTs were already a thing, but they were nowhere near as huge as they became a few years later. NFT art was exploding a couple years back, but it hasn't gone away. Sure, this episode premise was a little ridiculous. Art museums shutting down for NFTs might seem a little out there, but look around and you'll see it's not actually that far off. We've got virtual art galleries popping up, VR headsets for experiencing art, and AI-generated artwork that's been pushing the boundaries of what's considered real art. The point is, a lot of folks have plenty of things to entertain themselves with from the comfort of their own home now, barely ever feeling the need to go out and engage with the world, let alone going to an art gallery. So museums and art galleries shutting down is really not that far-fetched. Imagine a world where a machine, not a human, makes all the most important decisions. Well, according to folks like Elon Musk and a whole swath of AI researchers, we might not be too far away from that becoming a reality. Musk has been warning for years about the dangers of unregulated AI, calling it one of the biggest threats to humanity. The fear is that as AI becomes more advanced, it could end up running entire countries, controlling military systems and making life or death decisions with little to no human oversight. Some researchers predict that AI could surpass human intelligence by 2025. Some say it already has, and that makes it hard, if not impossible, for us to control it. This could lead to something terrifying: AI dictatorships. Here, we'll have AI running governments, dictating laws, controlling entire societies. Imagine a machine that monitors your every move, decides what jobs you can do, what healthcare you can receive, or how you should live your life in general. I don't think anyone is saying this is going to come to fruition in 2025, but that it's on the verge of happening. With AI evolving at such a fast speed, there's a real fear that we're losing control of something that was originally, supposedly, meant to serve us. The animals of the planet may be in serious trouble, and some experts are predicting that we could be facing a mass extinction event by 2025. According to a number of scientists, species are disappearing at an alarming rate, faster than they ever have in human history. The World Wildlife Fund, I'm still bitter that they changed that, WWE. Ugh. Anyway, they warn that we are in the 6th mass extinction, with more than 1 million species at risk of vanishing within the next couple decades. It's not just big animals dying out, but smaller creatures like insects too, and without them, the entire food chain just collapses. Deforestation, pollution, as we destroy habitats and pollute the water, species are either dying off or being forced to adapt at a pace they can't keep up with. The loss of pollinators like bees, for example, could have huge consequences for the planet. Imagine a world where deepfakes, hyper-realistic AI-generated videos, are used not to just make funny memes online, but to trick people into believing false news. It really doesn't take a genius to see how dangerous deepfaking can get, especially with how fast the technology is advancing. In the next few years, deepfake technology could be weaponized in ways that could create chaos on a massive scale. Deepfakes can already make it look like anyone is saying anything, and now there's a very real concern that this tech could be used to fake emergency broadcasts or health warnings even. What makes this terrifying is how easy it would be to panic the public, have people canceled that don't deserve to be. People could be attacked in the street for doing something they never actually did. Governments and tech companies are trying to develop tools to detect deepfakes, but the tech is just advancing so fast that we're just on a constant game of catch-up. Drones aren't just for taking pictures or delivering packages. By 2025, drone warfare could be a major part of global conflict. Military drones are already used for surveillance and airstrikes, but they're getting smarter and more deadly every year. What's really terrifying is the possibility of drones being used in autonomous combat, where, like I mentioned earlier, they could make life or death decisions on their own without any human influence. AI-powered drones operating in swarms, communicating with each other and coordinating attacks could change the way wars are fought. Even smaller groups or rogue states could get their hands on drone technology and use it to target military bases or even civilian populations. With each passing year, drones are getting closer and closer to being used on a more massive scale, leading to a kind of warfare that's faster, more unpredictable, and even harder to control, but most importantly, easier to carry out. I mean, killing is easy if you're doing it from the comfort of a chair far away from harm. Synthetic biology is becoming more of a reality every day as well. If you've never heard of George Church, he's a geneticist who's been working on this technology. His work focuses on genome editing, basically editing DNA to create either like new life forms or enhance the abilities of living things like you and me. It's really pushing the boundaries of what it means to be human. Scientists are already working on designer babies, editing genes to remove inherited diseases and enhancing things like strength, intelligence, or memory. Some predict that by 2025, there could be widespread genetic modification where human beings could literally choose the traits they want in their offspring or enhance their own bodies with biohacking techniques, at least within the next few years. Imagine people enhancing themselves with cybernetic limbs, enhanced vision, or AI-powered brain implants that could make us more than human, but also less human at the same time. It could be pretty cool, and there are definitely benefits to this type of thing, but it could also easily get out of hand. Will we still be human in the next few decades, or will it be something else entirely, and will we be ready to deal with it? How would you feel if every movie you made was being watched? Whether you're walking down the streets, logging into your computer, or even chatting with your friends. Some say this is already happening. I mean, your phone is pretty much listening to you all the time. Surveillance technology is only going to get more advanced as 2025 progresses. Are we going to be stuck in a global surveillance hell world by the end of next year? I mean, maybe not, but we're getting closer all the time. And it's not just government agencies keeping an eye on things either. With advancements in facial recognition, AI monitoring, smart devices, it's becoming easier for corporations to track people wherever they go. Reality is that cameras are already everywhere, and surveillance technology is getting more advanced by the day. Smart cities could be a huge part of this, where everything from traffic lights to street signs are connected to this system that can track every citizen's movement, gaining info on your habits, your preferences, maybe even your mood one day. We could see predictive surveillance as well, where AI analyzes data to anticipate what people might do before they even do it. Check out the anime Psychopaths if you're at all interested in that idea. The idea of the world's economy crashing might sound extreme, but by 2025 it could be closer to reality than we think. Right now, the global financial system is already under a lot of pressure. Countries are dealing with huge debt, rising costs, inflation. A lot of them are still trying to bounce back from economic crises like the one in 2020. The possibility of a worldwide economic collapse is becoming more likely. Some economists are saying that in the next few years, the way the world handles money could just totally break down. If countries can't get their finances under control, we could see hyperinflation where prices skyrocket and money loses its value. This could lead to massive job losses and millions of people being unable to afford even the basics, and this would set off a chain reaction, unrest, chaos for people all over the world. In 2025, we could see cyber terrorism becoming even more prevalent than it already is. Hackers, either working on their own or employed by their own country, could launch attacks on power grids, water systems, healthcare systems, throwing entire cities into chaos. What's scarier is that these cyber attacks could be almost impossible to trace. A single cyber attack could seriously mess things up for a whole country. It could shut down communication systems, crash the economy, but it's not just governments that are in danger. Businesses, hospitals, even regular people like you and me could be targeted. Imagine you wake up to find your bank account locked and your devices are all hacked. Not that that doesn't already happen now, but with the rise of AI and machine learning, cyber criminals are getting better at these attacks every day. They can move faster, think smarter, and make it harder for us to stop them. Within the next few years, climate change could force millions of people to leave their homes in search of safer ground. Rising sea levels, extreme natural disasters, failed crops, it'll all make some areas basically unlivable, creating what many experts are calling the first wave of climate refugees. These are people who have no choice but to leave their homes because the land they live on just isn't sustainable anymore. The most affected areas will likely be low-lying coastal regions and areas experiencing extreme droughts or flooding. People will migrate in search of water, food, basic resources, and just so that they can live in a place where they are constantly having to worry about being swept away in a monster tsunami. As more people are displaced, we could see global migration reach levels never seen before. This could cause political chaos, with governments struggling to take care of their own population, but also dealing with the needs of refugees. And that kind of leads into the next point: water. We all need it, but what if there's not enough to go around? According to a United Nations report, by 2025, almost 2/3 of the world's population could face severe water shortages. That means that billions of people could be without access to clean drinking water. It's not just a third world problem. Countries like India, China, even the US could be facing this. Why is this happening? Well, climate change is making water sources less predictable. The pollution is contaminating rivers and lakes. On top of that, the world's growing population and overconsumption are putting a huge pressure on water supplies. In some regions, like the Middle East and parts of Africa, people already live in what's known as water scarcity, meaning they don't have enough water to meet their daily needs. As fresh water becomes more scarce, countries could start fighting over it, just like how we fight over oil. Tensions over water rights are already on the rise, and some are warning that if something isn't done soon, we could see more water wars, and that's a global crisis we don't want to face.